Okay, welcome back to James chapter 1. We're just finishing out verse 12, where we saw that the the severity of the trial that James is talking about here to his readers is revealed by the largeness, the greatness of the promise to those who persevere. God's not promising crowns of life to those who, suffer through their car not starting one morning. Okay, that's not the kind of trial that James is really talking about here. And in these kinds of trials, as I mentioned last time, there's not just a normal temptation that you'd face in any trial, maybe to get angry and kind of lose your cool for a little bit, but a greater temptation to abandon your faith in Jesus Christ and to say, you know what, I had it, this is too high a price to pay, I'm going to go back to where I was before this trial started, and I'm going to, not subject myself to what brought this trial on. And so the temptation then that they're facing is addressed in verse number 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. So there's a real point of clarification to all of James's readers who are being tempted to overemphasize the sovereignty of God to a degree that would be unbiblical. Although God does test everyone, and that's implied in what we've already read in the first chapters of James, he doesn't tempt anyone. Satan is often given the credit for being the tempter, and certainly he deserves some of that credit. But it's interesting that James doesn't even mention Satan and his temptations in the next verse as he explains where temptation comes from. It doesn't come from God, verse 14, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Now, I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. Other versions say it a little bit differently, but the word there that's translated lust, that to us always has, a sexual connotation. In the original Greek, it really means just simply desire. It could mean any desire that is opposed to the will of God. And I like to translate it that way. Otherwise, we just think that he's talking here about all temptation stems from, illicit sexual desire. All right, so let's read it that way. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own desires. There's where the seat of the blame lies. And sure, Satan is a tempter. Sure, Satan tempts us. We know that from other parts of Scripture. But in the final analysis, it's not until we embrace Satan's temptations when we yield to them, it indicates that that's our desire to yield to them. Our desire is contrary to God's will for us. Okay, so in the final analysis, Satan might be the agent of temptation, but in the final analysis, it falls right upon us. We're the ones responsible. Let me read it again to you in verse 14. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own desire. So there's a clue as to how to beat temptation. Recognize it early and don't let it carry you away and entice you. All right, very important. You realize the more that we think about temptation, the more we are apt to yield to it. In fact, thinking about yielding to temptation is, in a small sense, yielding to the temptation, right? Now, I'm not saying it's a sin because, we don't sin until we actually do the act. And I'm not saying that temptation isn't tempting and that sin isn't tempting. We have a battle going on between the spirit and the flesh, we're told by the Apostle Paul. So I don't want anyone to go overboard on this, but I'm just giving you a little bit of insight as to how to avoid sin, avoid temptation. And when you face temptation, nail it down as fast as you can. Get away from it. Run from it if need be. Snip it off at the bud. Don't let it carry you away. Because everybody knows that if they keep on thinking about a temptation long enough, eventually they're going to hook themselves into it and say, okay, whew, take me away. That's when you make the decision to yield to the temptation. Right? That's why the Apostle Paul said, think on these things. Think on things that are pure and worthy of praise and that are good and that are lovely. Right? We can control our thought lives. And we can also control the stimuli that we allow to enter in through our eyes and through our ears and our other senses. I travel quite a bit, domestically and internationally. I just got back from a 3-state trip here out west to New Mexico and California and to Nevada, meeting with supporters of Heaven's Family. Stayed in hotels all along the way, and I didn't even notice it until I didn't even think about it, but I made a commitment a long time ago. When I go into a hotel room, I just don't turn on the TV, because they all have TVs there. They all have millions of channels and movies. You just put that little thing and you can skim through them. I'm just afraid that as I, skim through some of those looking for what might be something acceptable to watch, I might stumble upon something unacceptable to watch and then might yield to it, okay? Because I know myself. So the way I avoid that is to cut it off entirely and completely. Don't even turn it on. Then you avoid the temptation, and that way you can't sin, okay? And that's a decision to take up a cross and follow Christ, denying yourself, crucifying the flesh. All of that is a part of following Christ. James goes on now to warn of the ultimate, very serious consequences when we allow wrong desire, to carry us away and entice us in verse number 15. Then when lust has conceived, well, let's change the word again there too so that we're not misunderstanding. Then when wrong desire, so not just sexual desire, but when wrong desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Now, what did James mean? Every time you sin, do you die spiritually? Well, we're out of time. I'll answer that question next time. And so I'll see you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.